Welcome to our new set of movies. We've already ventured through the Alien series and the Predator series, but now it's time to bring them together for the two Alien vs. Predator movies we've been dealt. As usual, go ahead and hit that notification button to stay up to date with all the content that gets uploaded. Alright, so if you've seen my other videos, you kind of have the gist of, what I'm talking about, where the Alien and Predator franchise stems from. Even before Alien 3 and Predator 2, we had seen toy lines and comic books in the early 90s, so things were slowly building up to this point. In 2003, we got our first still, and this had Alien and Predator fans excited. They were finally bringing these iconic series both together. Anyone that's an Alien vs. Predator fan will remember the excitement for this movie. Some of us are indifferent about the result of what we got, the eventual result of the movie. I personally, before that, I was so intrigued and deep into the Alien vs. Predator Gold Edition video game. I had my own opinion and my own thoughts about how an Alien vs. Predator movie would play out, and I knew in 2003, Freddy vs. Jason came out, and I was just so ready. I was so ready to see my favorite creatures, besides Godzilla, face off on the big screen, bring them together finally. I still remember my excitement when I first saw the first teaser trailer. It was featured on the director cut of the Alien movies and the Predator movies they had been re-releasing on DVD at this point, and this is at a time where DVDs were such a big deal, standard DVDs, way before YouTube had existed, way before social media like Facebook and Instagram, and they were putting trailers up there. You saw them in your feed first, right then and there. Simpler times then. 14-year-old me gleefully went to the theaters. I gotta say, I went through several years of different opinions and reactions of this movie. In the beginning, I loved it. Then after that, I went through this phase of 3 years from 2007 to about 2010 where I hated the movie. And then for that, somewhere along the line, things changed, and I'm at where I am today. So, as a reflection of this movie, I always loved how the environment feels so isolated in a deep, uncharted territory. On Earth, unknown to man. I have a firm appreciation that this movie does not use too much CGI. In fact, it makes use of more practical effects. I understand in the 90s, CGI was all the rage. We saw what it could do. It could take things to a new level. But some movies were kind of oversaturated, and you had some movies like Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection where the CGI just did not age well, and it looks bad nowadays. Then you had other movies like Jurassic Park, the original one, and yes, there are some scenes that look, imperfect, but for the most part, it's aged well and still looks like a masterpiece. Even where the CGI is used, predominantly in the Queen scene, it looks masterful, and this is during a period where CGI was becoming more masterful. It wasn't as well crafted at certain points in the 90s, but this is where it holds up definitely, and it's used where it needs to be. And also, let's not undermine the other sequences where we see CGI used in this movie. As time went on, I started to see more cracks in this movie. For example, one scene I was very underwhelmed with when I first saw this movie would have to be when Scar takes off his mask. I was kind of disappointed because I expected a little bit more, and something looked awkward about how it was designed, and I know during this time they were messing around with different mechanics and new technology. They were trying to get expressions and emotions out of the Predator's face that we hadn't seen before, but it just came off really awkward. I don't want to knock Scar too much. There's certain things I could go on all day about, just there's certain features on the face that just caught me off guard in this movie. I'll admit I had mixed reactions about the Predator teaming with a human, just because simply what does it matter if she survives? It only puts Scar at risk by trying to protect her, and when he has a plan to destroy the pyramid and survive for himself. However, this movie plays off the idea that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, so Scar may have an understanding that his chances of survival are a little bit better if he works with her. I've been less harsh on this throughout the years. I also want to point out that I understand that it's easier to make the Predator the protagonist of this movie over the Xenomorph, so somewhere along the line they had to make that change, and I think it's just so much easier this way, and it does work. And to back this claim up, we've already seen that the Predator has a moral code in Predator 1 and Predator 2 from the sequences that we've seen. When I was younger, I used to pick this movie apart at one point because it was PG-13, which felt kind of weak at the time. And stay tuned in my next video because I'm going to expand on this more. But then eventually I kind of looked at it and kind of thought, is this really an issue? I mean, looking back at it, when does a rated R movie guarantee it's going to be a good movie? So if I had to talk to myself, from the past, that's probably a point I'd bring up. Looking back, I think I was just kind of underwhelmed because I was so used to seeing movies with all kinds of blood and guts and gore, and seeing it was PG-13 was like, what? It just kind of caught me off guard. Probably the likely reason they made it PG-13 was because they wanted to reach a broader audience, It was the best way to do it. There was more fighting between the alien and Predator, and less humans being ripped apart, so it really wasn't going to get or gather that rated R rating. Character-wise, some of our characters feel a little dry in this movie, with the exception of Charles Bishop Whalen. And then you have Lex, which isn't a terrible character, but it just seems like it kind of sucks in retrospect, knowing this is the only movie she appeared in. It would have been great if they got her back for the sequel. It would have been great if the sequel had been any other movie and had any other script. You know, they could have built on the character further, you know, like Ripley they had done. Just unfortunately, this is the only time we see the character. We really don't know what happens to her after the movie. There was indeed room for character development. The story for this movie has a big W. Like, I want to say it's a big win. It's one of my favorite parts of it. Before we should talk about the movie though, I want to mention that my ideal AVP script was very different, and I would have saw it taking place between Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, in the future, in space. And yes, as a kid, I envisioned it with colonial marines, a war between the Predators and the space jockeys before Prometheus, came out ever. Aliens were used as a bioweapon. I had a whole idea that I wrote in a notebook that unfortunately is lost. I'd love to talk about it more. The actual movie we got is different, and I like what we got. It went to an area that is very different. So our movie setting is set on Earth 2004, present day. Initially, I didn't like this idea, but I think it avoids any cliche, type setting. They could have set it in New York, LA, Chicago, and had xenomorphs overrunning a big city, and the Predators are fighting back, Some of the idea, is kind of saved for the sequel, where they set it in the small town of Colorado. I would have rather than not do that, and mainly because I'm a big fan of isolated feelings, type movies where you don't know what's working anywhere. Furthermore, this movie dives into the whole ancient alien type situation where ancient civilizations make contact with the Predator, and they offer themselves as a sacrifice. They die so the Predator can create the ultimate killer, so they can earn their rites of passage, and that's essentially the xenomorphs that the Predators have to go through and prove themselves through. One could argue, well, why doesn't the Predators just colonize the planet and just wipe us out, slowly? But to me, it's simple. They've established relations with the humans as long as they want, and they get what they want. Eventually, the whole operation goes south, and we get this iconic flashback sequence. All the history is lost in Antarctica. Looking back at this, I love this idea. It's bold and interesting, and I like that they go here for this film. It was different than what anything else had done before, with the video games, and it took us to brand new areas. This movie has a divide in feelings, but like Predator 2, it's found its love through the years. We still have fans that are underwhelmed with what we got, and yes, they are allowed to voice their displeasure with the movie. I still believe we deserve the perfect Alien vs. Predator movie. Who knows if that's ever going to happen. Me personally, I gather way more from this movie than I did back in 2006 or 2007, when my opinion was really changing. Finally, near the end, we did get our Predalien, though just in chestburster form, and it did kind of hint that we were kind of getting a sequel. I just wish we got an entirely different sequel, I'll butcher that movie next. It's really disappointing to know that we got a movie that added on nothing to this really cool lore and story that was added in the first Alien vs. Predator. For all it's worth though, it was epic seeing them meet finally on screen. Could it be executed better? Absolutely yes. But one thing I love is it makes the xenomorphs maintain their intelligence. They don't look weak. We get Grid, who is one of the most memorable xenomorphs from the movie, and actually probably one of the most memorable since the original one. We got a great trio of Predators, and I love and respect how this movie intentionally misleads the viewers into believing that Celtic is the central predator, only for Scar to be the one that goes out fighting like a king. Definitely a movie that's aged well in my eyes. I would have said otherwise years ago. Toys next. Fair amount to cover. So because this is all a joint line, let me get things straight. Series 14 was the debut of the AVP series, bringing us Chopper, Scar, and Celtic. The Alien series gave us two xenomorphs being Grid and a standard xenomorph in Series 7. Let's also consider that the Alien wave was 3 years behind the Predator line, which had launched in 2010. So our xenomorphs first. Less figures, but they differ up close when you really look at them. We have a standard xenomorph. I want to admit I'm a bigger fan of the Alien Resurrection xenomorphs with the legs and the hands. I just think it looks better, but the black paint with the silver highlights is just amazing. So to differ and offset things, Grid's paint app is more of a blue, and of course it nails the netting marks, which it is known for, the distinctive netting marks that you've seen from the fight scene in AVP. The only negatives on this figure is it loses the translucent dome. That was obviously an iconic thing they had brought back for this movie and used on the Xenomorphs. So that is one thing that kind of drops it back a little bit. Also, the tail is not entirely accurate, because by the time he had been netted, his tail had been cut off, the tip of it. I should mention though that NECA did release a 2-pack with Celtic and Grid as Battle Damage 2-pack. This was an exclusive at Toys R Us. Never got my hands on it, you know, it had a fair amount of exclusiveness, you know, it's one of those things that maybe down the road they'll re-release it. If they did, I'd buy it. It's just that back then, like I've said in my previous videos, I didn't go out of my way for these. I only did it for one. I'm not exactly complaining about it either, just one of those little flaws that I just want to kind of point out though, being honest about it. That's it on the Xenomorph end. I mean, that's all that was really ever touched on. I'm shocked that they never released a queen. You know, all they have to do is modify, you know, a few things on the feet, you know, and legs possibly. Maybe a few other things I'm overlooking, but it really wouldn't be much, you know, change the packaging, you know, we already got 3 queens the way it is. The Predator side, though, there was a lot to touch on, and this is where the cost started rising for these figures, and more weapons were packaged in. They were definitely becoming more and more worth it. The netting was being nailed a bit better, brand new mold. I couldn't dig it up, but I firmly recall that there was an old Twitter post that Randy Falk had said he didn't want to touch the AVP Predators. I remember him even once teasing if they did do it, they'd probably slim the Predators down because he was not a fan of the linebacker design, and wouldn't you know it, eventually, they gave us the Predator figures as they should be intended, you know. That's the only way I wanted them in my collection, if it was movie accurate. These guys stand out on the shelf, you know, they're some of my favorites, you know. I say that probably about a lot of them, but definitely though, I just know seeing them on the shelf, they're just so distinctive and hulking out compared to the normal Predators that we have. Complete with their shoulder cannons. Even if Celtic and Chopper got dusted and never had a chance to use theirs, Scar has 3 variations with his crazy wrist blades. Unlike the previous Predators, which had the wrist blades that slid out, these ones peg in, and it's a lot better than the 2010 Predator figures. And I mean that because I've seen these guys take falls off the shelf and they're still intact. Thankfully they didn't go the same route the McFarlane toys did. If you don't know, basically the McFarlane Predators, how they did it was they sculpted them right to the wrist blades, like they were actually sculpted in. Here you can just pull them out, you can swap them out, and it's much better. And those McFarlane figures, my biggest issue I had is they were way too brittle. Now, of course, these new ones, if they take the right fall, like directly off the shelf onto the blades, yeah, they're gonna snap, but I just prefer these ones a lot more. Mainly because if you're traveling, or if you're moving, you can just pop all that stuff out, safely put it in a little baggie, and you don't have to worry about it breaking, you know, in the moving process, that is. You're also able to put the spear or the staff on the back of them if you want to. Chopper has his skulls, which, to be honest, they are very tedious to even get them on his back. You know, any sudden movement, any wrong movement, they'll fall off. I mean, I don't even think there was really much, like, instructions. You just figured it out based on, like, you know, common sense to get him in there. I could be wrong, could be forgetting something, but wait, there's more. We got our AVP Elder Predator, and I'm so thankful for how the cape was handled here. I would have been very bothered if they just sculpted it out of plastic, you know, some cheap plastic, but no, it's actual fabric. It's a nice one too, it's a decent fabric that's held up through the years. One nitpick about this figure though is it does not give off the best movie accuracy in my opinion. It fails to capture those crazy quills. We did get the helmet, you know. If you do put on the helmet though, and if they had those quills, I can only imagine that they probably would have had issues putting on the helmet, but I never put the helmet on. I usually just have them holding it. To my surprise, they actually did the 3 Flashback Predators. Warrior, Ancient Warrior that is, not to be confused with the other Warrior Predator. I have firm memories with this figure. I took it at Pikes Peak with a good buddy of mine at Summit Kaiju, and he took a gigantic Godzilla 64. Just us. We love doing crazy weird stuff, you know, and it's good memories. Then we got Temple Guard and Youngblood, who is a personal favorite of mine because of that nice, clean, shiny armor. But boy, does he suffer from weak wrist. More than often, I come home and find his hand detached from his arm, mainly because of the fact the staff and the alien head on the top is so heavy that it does not maintain and stay in the peg. So that's probably, I don't know if it's just mine. If anybody else has the issue, let me know. I mean, I could fix it, you know, it's just one of those things, though, that I've maintained and dealt with, though. Still a key figure and a favorite of mine. I should also mention that they also released AVP pillars, which I passed on this. I think I honestly just kind of didn't even really hear about it or think much of it when it came out. Everything creature-wise, though, has been touched on. However, there is one missing part, and that would be Chestburster, Chet, that we'd come to know as our Predalien, even though he was unnamed until the sequel. I firmly believe eventually NECA will dip into the ultimate AVP figures. Give us the ultimate treatment. We don't know when that's going to happen. That's a long road, and we got other priorities first. We just gotta wait and see when it happens.